The full-scale war that began in February 2022 was not a sudden event. It was the eruption of a conflict with roots stretching back decades, even centuries, into the shared and contested history of Russia and Ukraine. To understand the current fighting, one must look beyond the immediate headlines. The story truly began to take its modern shape after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, when Ukraine became an independent nation. This new reality created tension. Russia struggled to accept Ukraine's sovereignty, viewing it as a historical part of its own sphere of influence. For many in Russia, the idea of an independent, westward-looking Ukraine was a direct challenge to their identity and security. This fundamental disagreement over Ukraine's right to choose its own path laid the groundwork for future conflict. The situation escalated dramatically in 2014. It started with the Maidan Revolution in Kyiv, where widespread protests overthrew a pro-Russian president. Russia viewed this event as an illegal Western-backed coup designed to pull Ukraine into NATO's orbit. In response, Russia moved swiftly to annex the Crimean Peninsula, a region with a majority ethnic Russian population and home to Russia's Black Sea Fleet. This act was a violation of international law and was condemned by much of the world. At the same time, a war began in Ukraine's eastern Donbas region. Russia supported separatist forces there who declared independence from Ukraine. This 8-year conflict simmered, claiming thousands of lives and creating a deep, unhealed wound between the two nations long before the full invasion. From the Western perspective, the conflict is a clear case of Russian aggression against a sovereign neighbor. The narrative points to Russia's desire to rebuild an empire and its refusal to accept the post-Cold War order in Europe. The expansion of NATO is seen as a defensive measure, a response to the desires of free countries seeking protection from potential Russian threats. This viewpoint emphasizes that the 2022 invasion was an unprovoked attack aimed at extinguishing Ukrainian statehood and redrawing the map of Europe by force. It highlights Russia's violation of international treaties and the UN Charter, framing the war as a struggle between democracy and authoritarianism. Russia offers a very different explanation for its actions. It argues that the conflict was forced upon it by the relentless eastward expansion of NATO. Despite what it claims were assurances given after the Cold War, the military alliance moved closer and closer to Russia's borders. Moscow saw this as an existential threat to its national security. Russian leaders also point to the treatment of ethnic Russians and Russian speakers in Ukraine, citing laws that limited the use of the Russian language as evidence of persecution. From this viewpoint, the 2014 Maidan Revolution was the final straw, a hostile takeover of Ukraine by nationalist forces backed by the United States. The invasion, therefore, is framed as a defensive special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine and protect its own security interests. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion from multiple directions. Columns of tanks and troops poured across the borders from the north, east, and south. The primary goal appeared to be a rapid takeover of the capital, Kyiv, and the installation of a new pro-Russian government. Russian forces advanced from Belarus towards Kyiv, while other offensives targeted major cities like Kharkiv in the east and Kherson in the south. The initial phase of the war was marked by shock and a widespread belief that Ukraine would fall quickly. However, the Ukrainian military and civilian population mounted a fierce and unexpectedly effective resistance, stalling the Russian advance on the capital and inflicting heavy losses on the invaders. After failing to capture Kyiv, Russia shifted its strategy in the spring of 2022. It withdrew its forces from northern Ukraine and refocused its efforts on conquering the Donbas region and securing a land bridge to Crimea. The war transformed into a brutal battle of attrition, characterized by heavy artillery duels and slow, grinding advances. The fighting became concentrated in cities like Mariupol, which was devastated by a long siege before falling to Russian forces. Later that year, Ukraine launched successful counteroffensives. In a stunning push, Ukrainian troops recaptured large areas in the Kharkiv region, and in November 2022 liberated the city of Kherson, the only regional capital Russia had managed to capture since the invasion began. The years 2023 and 2024 saw the front lines harden into a vast network of trenches, reminiscent of World War I. Battles for strategic towns like Bakhmut and Avdiivka in the Donetsk region became symbols of the war's immense human cost. with both sides suffering staggering casualties for small gains. In early 2024, after months of intense fighting, Ukrainian forces withdrew from Avdiivka, a significant tactical victory for Russia. This was followed in May 2024 by a new Russian offensive in the Kharkiv region, which opened another front and put further pressure on Ukraine's overstretched defenders. This move came after a long delay in United States military aid, which had left Ukrainian forces vulnerable. In a surprising turn of events, in August 2024, Ukraine launched a bold and unexpected incursion into Russia's Kursk region. Ukrainian forces advanced deep into Russian territory, catching the Russian military off guard and seizing control of a significant area. This counter-offensive was a major psychological blow to Moscow and demonstrated Ukraine's continued ability to conduct complex military operations. It also shifted the geography of the conflict, bringing the fighting directly onto Russian soil on a scale not seen before. As of mid-2025, intense fighting continues not only in eastern and southern Ukraine, but also within the Kursk region, with both sides locked in a deadly struggle for control. The human suffering caused by this conflict is immense and heartbreaking. The biggest loser, by any measure, is Ukraine. Its cities have been reduced to rubble, its economy has been devastated, and its critical infrastructure has been systematically destroyed. Millions of Ukrainians have been forced to flee their homes, creating one of the largest refugee crises in Europe since World War II. An entire generation has been traumatized by violence and loss. Beyond the physical destruction, Ukrainian democracy has been suspended under martial law, and the nation faces the monumental task of rebuilding almost from scratch, a process that will take decades and require enormous international support. The toll on its military is also severe, with tens of thousands of its bravest soldiers killed, defending their homeland. Russia has also paid a heavy price for its invasion. The military has suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties, losses that have shaken communities across the country. International sanctions have damaged parts of its economy, isolating it from global financial systems and advanced technology. However, the Russian government has consolidated its power, suppressing dissent and pivoting the economy towards a war footing. While it has faced setbacks, Russia has also achieved some of its stated goals, such as securing a land bridge to Crimea and neutralizing Ukraine as an immediate military threat on its borders. The war has also accelerated Russia's turn away from the West and towards new partnerships with countries like China and Iran. Europe has been profoundly affected by the war as well. The continent has had to absorb millions of Ukrainian refugees, a significant social and economic challenge. The decision to sever ties with Russian energy supplies led to a severe energy crisis and high inflation, weakening industrial competitiveness, particularly in countries like Germany. The war has shattered the sense of security that had prevailed in Europe for decades, forcing nations to dramatically increase their defense spending. NATO has been revitalized and expanded, with Finland and Sweden joining the alliance, creating a new and more heavily fortified border with Russia. Europe is now more united in its opposition to Russia, but also more dependent on the United States for its security. Despite the staggering costs, efforts to find a diplomatic solution have repeatedly failed. Early peace talks in Istanbul in March 2022 collapsed, with both sides blaming each other. Subsequent peace initiatives have gone nowhere, as the fundamental positions remain far apart. Ukraine insists on the restoration of its 1991 borders, while Russia is unwilling to relinquish the territories it has annexed. In early 2025, the new United States administration began pushing for negotiations, but these talks also stalled. A proposal floated by Ukrainian President Zelensky to potentially swap Russian-held Ukrainian land for the territory Ukraine now controls in Russia's Kursk region has not yet led to a breakthrough. As of June 2025, the path to a lasting peace remains elusive, locked in a stalemate of military attrition and diplomatic deadlock. This war, fought on the plains of Eastern Europe, is about more than just the territory of Ukraine. It is a conflict that forces us to confront some of the biggest and oldest questions in history. At its heart is the question of borders and sovereignty. Are borders sacred and unchangeable, or can they be redrawn by force based on historical claims or security concerns? Ukraine is fighting for the principle that a nation has the right to exist within its internationally recognized borders, free from foreign domination. Russia's actions, on the other hand, challenge this principle, arguing that a great power security interest can justify changing those borders. This fundamental clash has shaken the foundations of the international legal order established after World War II. The conflict is also a profound struggle over the meaning of security. For decades, the West believed that security could be achieved through the expansion of alliances like NATO, creating a collective defense against potential aggressors. This was seen as a way to protect the freedom of smaller nations. However, Russia viewed this same expansion as a direct and growing threat to its own safety, a hostile encirclement that it had to push back against. The war shows how one nation's pursuit of security can be perceived as another's aggression, leading to a dangerous spiral of mistrust and confrontation. The result is a Europe that feels less safe than at any time since the Cold War, with both sides building up their military power. This war has also exposed the fragility of peace and the difficulty of ending a major conflict once it begins. It demonstrates how historical grievances, nationalist passions, and geopolitical rivalries can combine to create a catastrophe. The search for a lasting peace in Ukraine is now tied to these larger issues. Any resolution will not only have to address the immediate questions of territory and reparations, but also find a way to build a new security structure where both Russia and its neighbors can feel safe. This requires a level of trust and diplomacy that currently seems impossible to achieve. The war serves as a grim reminder that peace is not a permanent state, but a constant and difficult process of negotiation and compromise. Ultimately, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has become a defining event of the 21st century. It has accelerated the shift towards a more divided, multipolar world, strengthening the alliance between Russia and China as a counterweight to American and European influence. It has forced a global realignment, with countries around the world having to navigate the complex pressures of this new geopolitical landscape. The war is a tragic story of human loss and destruction, but it is also a powerful lesson in history. It teaches us about the enduring power of national identity, the dangers of unresolved historical disputes, and the constant difficult search for a balance between sovereignty, security, and peace in an interconnected world.